And then comes Ukraine. And it's a classic David versus Goliath story. And I think for a lot of us, it was appealing because this was right versus wrong. There's no gray, there's no
Yeah,
murkiness.
yeah.
And and then what I think about is the same thing I thought about Afghans who we betrayed and Kurds we betrayed. But the betrayal of the Ukrainians. Imagine if you're one of the members of SAF right now in Europe. I don't think they're in Ukraine, but in Europe, training Ukrainians, or you're a CIA officer in at Kyiv Station. How do you look at your partners in the eye this morning?
We have eyes on.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Eyes On. Very special one today. We have Jack Murphy and Marc Polymeropoulos, the no Marines. Thank God. Lot cooking. Want to thank Marc, of course. Marc, former senior CIA officer, current national security analyst and expert. Jack Murphy, of course, our dear leader, host of the Team House and writer of The High Side. Guys, how's it going? What's happening in the world? Marc, how are you? You start because I know you're red hot.
No, so it's good. So I just got back. I have a little home gym that we built during COVID. So I was just lifted, and I was listening to French heavy metal Gojira. So I'm all fucking jazzed up now. But I wanted to say something because every time I come on, I love coming on the show. I've done this for years. But I was just out at the University of Colorado at their ROTC program talking to the cadets about leadership. They're a couple of the Army guys invited me out just because they had heard me where on the fucking Team House. Literally, I get a phone call and said, "Hey, I heard you on the Team House. I loved your leadership stuff. Would you come out and talk to the cadets?" So I went out there, and you all have a huge following, even amongst the kind of youngsters coming up. And so, and I want to tell you one thing: if you ever go to Colorado, University of Colorado in Boulder, oh my God, what a place!
That's cool. That's exactly the type of audience, that I hope we reach out to, young people who are interested in, serving their country in some shape or form, and not to really persuade them one way or the other, but to, if you're interested in this, here's a lot of more information. You can listen to someone like Marc talk about, in depth about the agency for in his career there, and that can help them make their decision. So yeah, those are exactly the type of people you hope you reach to.
And one of those things is that they also what the cadets told me, and also there was a couple Jack, couple Army Rangers who run the program there, but they said they loved how you bring on folks, and this probably won't apply today, but who are apolitical. And so because you have in kind of the vet bro world, kind of
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
people who kind of go crazy on the right, but you all don't do that, and you bring on people who serve their country and tell some unique stories, and you try to keep it apolitical. One of my favorite things is whenever I listen to Team House and you see one of your guests go down a certain road and how you and Dave kind of madly scramble to try to get them back on track.
Yeah, yeah, we're not necessarily trying to go down that road.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think I had a conversation with Doug Wise a while back where he said something like that. He's like, this is one of the few nonpartisan spaces where people from this profession can talk. And he's like, there's not very many of them.
So amen to you guys. So happy to be on as always.
And
Yeah,
just an
thank you, Marc.
editor's note, by design, that's by design. We do that on purpose. And me and Jack talk about this offline all the time, that it hinders and has hindered our growth.
Oh, for
But
sure.
we're going to keep it like that, even if it means less money in our pockets, clear. You know what I mean? Like, we're never going to just kowtow. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is like a little aside, a little like anecdote that maybe means nothing to anyone at this point. But, many years ago, I fell into the circle of Ginny Thomas, the Supreme Court Justice's
Wow.
wife, who is quite a sort of an activist. Not that I ever met her or anything like that, but she was emailing me and trying to get me to testify in front of Congress, trying to get me to talk to 60 Minutes and all these other people. Not that I'm have a problem talking to Congress or journalists, but I realized at that point, I was like, if I do this, I'm allowing myself to become a political tool, and the entire rest of my life is going to be different. And probably like, I was still young. I mean, I was like 30 or something like that. And I was just like, this isn't the road I want to go down.
One of the interesting things is I obviously, as denoted, I do some media commentary and I have a contract with MSNBC. So take it whatever you want to take it in terms of political ideology. But if people actually watched my hits during the Afghan withdrawal, I was savage against the Biden administration for how they hosed this up. And so I think, one of the things that I try to do is call it like I see it, and that's what I think you all do as well. And so that's just kind of a smart place to be. If you find yourselves being hated by everybody, you can be loved by everybody too. But if you annoyed both the right and the left, Jack, I think you've probably done your job.
For
That's
sure.
the right place to be.
But I will say though, all of that said, I also have felt in the over the last month or so that maybe it's more important not necessarily to get partisan, but like I'm seeing things that I think are pretty messed up, and I think it's
Yeah.
important that we say they're messed up. Like
Oh
this
yeah.
isn't cool. This isn't okay. And I don't think it's necessarily a left or a right issue. Like we'll talk about Ukraine in a little bit. Like it's not necessarily a left or right issue. It's just like this is stupid.
Well, right. I mean, I have to, half of my friends are Republicans. And I spend half of my day on Signal chats saying, really? This is really what you signed up for? With Trump siding with Putin, or threatening to fire the probationary officers at the CIA, or the special agents at the FBI. I mean, these are actually not conservative principles in
Right.
what's happening right now.
Yeah,
So I'm
it's
very comfortable
the
speaking
question
out.
is what are you trying to conserve? Because it doesn't seem like they're trying to conserve the United States government or constitution at this moment.
Look, government sucks until, planes start falling out of the sky and terrorist attacks happen in the United States and your VA checks don't get to you. And then there's a freaking measles or bird flu epidemic. And your kids are sick. And so, this kind of, war on government, I find ludicrous. We want to reform government. Everybody does. If you
Sure.
actually worked, you're in the military, I was in the CIA. I could spend 5 hours telling you all the reforms that are needed. You probably could do the same thing. We could have a whole podcast on the Pentagon procurement process, which is
Oh yeah.
also, do we need giant aircraft carriers? I mean, look at Ukraine and the explosion in indigenously produced drones that are having effects on the battlefield. So, reform is really good, but this is kind of I call it the wet dream of the Chinese or Russian intelligence services. It looks like a covert action plan to like destroy the U.S. government
Yeah,
with
I mean that's the
no
thing. If
idea
you
of the
had
effect.
if you had infiltrated your people into the United States government, like J. Edgar Hoover suspected, this is exactly what they would be doing. They'd be flipping all the switches off, unplugging things, firing people, just like jamming up the works so that nothing can happen.
Let me say that I have lots of friends in the FBI who all believe in the need for reform, but the idea that you're going to take it's 6,000 FBI personnel who worked on January 6 cases, 900 special agents. The lists of them went down to this kind of weird OMB Elon Musk thing, which we don't really know is secure or not, and to DOJ. But one thing that I don't know if the American people realize is that the agents involved in the January 6 cases were taken from the Joint Terrorism Task Forces because they considered it domestic terrorism,
They
which,
they were taken from all over, Mark. I mean, like that sucked up like a third of the bureau.
but if you end up getting rid of these people, that's gutting the JTTFs around the country. It's also doing two other things. One is their existing caseload, what happens to it. But number two, and I don't think this has been talked enough about, do you really want think about things we did overseas when we're trying to advise reform of security services. Here's what you don't do. You don't throw, 6,000 FBI personnel or 2,000 CIA officers out in the streets overnight who are
Yeah.
angry. That's a counterintelligence disaster. I'm not talking about civil unrest.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about people with mortgages to pay, with top secret clearances, who need health care, and who, when they get hit up on LinkedIn by a consulting firm located in Dubai that wants their services, it's the Chinese intelligence organizations who are going to hit them up. So there's so many second order effects of just a lot of these really ill thought out moves. And but again, I don't see a whole lot of pushback from the Republicans, and I guess the American people think it's okay. The CBS News poll from last week said Trump had a 53% approval rating, which means this shit's going to keep going until something bad happens.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm the one that's out of touch, right? Like you start to wonder this you had mentioned earlier, like maybe America isn't the country that we thought it was. It's actually something different. It seems like we're in this point, this era right now where people who are intimidated by complexity, where I think the information environment has become so overwhelming that everyone wants to distill it down, and you know, quote unquote common sense. And you know, you can that complexity in that information environment makes people feel uncomfortable. But when you start trying to eliminate it, I mean, the way the globalized world works today, I mean, we can't go back to the Stone Age. Like, it's not possible at this point. I mean, not without, you know, catastrophe and apocalypse happening.
Right, right. And so, so we're left with a time in which we are kind of battling for the truth. I mean, I think Dee follows me on Twitter probably more than you do. But I threw a fit and kind of said I wouldn't go on Twitter anymore a couple months ago. Now I'm back on in full
Jack's
force.
been good. He's out. He's not on
Yeah, I
Twitter.
haven't.
And look, trust me, I get more hate mail and death threats on Twitter. Some of them are funny. I think I might have told you guys. Someone called me an Islamist communist one time, and that I should
Sick.
hang. But I don't really know what an Islamist communist actually is because it kind of doesn't exist.
I mean, people are so brainwashed. I mean, we will do an interview with, you know, a woman who served in the army, and you get a bunch of comments like, "Oh, this is the DEI
Right, right.
podcast." I was like,
Yes.
"You're just a water buffalo. Like, you can't think for yourself at all. You're just regurgitating propaganda like a communist."
One of the things that I've done is I do a lot of talks to college students who are interested in national security careers, and I had a line in this, and I kept it. I was brave. I was just at the University of Colorado recently, and I actually say diversity, is our superpower. That, of course, is exactly what Pete Hegseth, new Secretary of Defense, said in his hearing. He said we should never say that again. And I disagree. And I tell the students why is because on the streets of places like Moscow and Damascus, the most sensitive assets are often handled by female case officers. If you serve and work and serve in the Middle East, and you're a CIA officer, and you guys know this, but for the audience, if you go out in what's called a surveillance detection route, it's the idea of making sure you don't take surveillance, the bad guys, to your agent meeting. If you have a female officer in a full abaya, guess what they're not going to do? They're not going to get caught. We need to have female officers. We need to have people who don't look like the three of us on this program. I remember, so many instances in which we had this ethnically diverse station, in which they spoke different languages, and one of the reasons why we didn't get caught was good tradecraft, but also is because we could look differently on the street. That's the best athlete approach, and that's where diversity is great. But when you hear things like the Pentagon is not going to there was just a news article that they're not going to I guess it was engineering conference or event at a historically black college, or something in which used to be a very good kind of recruiting tool for the military. Well, they can't go anymore because of the anti-woke, anti-DEI stuff. That's insane. We're going to end up, and some of your listeners are going to go crazy when I say this, we're going to end up with an all-white intelligence and military. If we kind of go down these paths of, what, we can't celebrate, Black History Month. You can't have a women's council.
Yeah.
And even at the agency, when I go into these colleges and I talk to folks, and a female officer, a female candidate would come up and say, "Is CIA a comfortable place for women?" And I said, it's gotten better. We've had sexual harassment scandals, but here's why: because we really cannot, female officers have kind of a tremendous advantage in some places. But also, what? There's a women's council at the CIA. You will have a group outside of work where you can talk to people. That doesn't exist anymore. That's crazy. So, is the DEI stuff annoying sometimes? Sure it is. I went through all this stuff. I was told in a 3-day seminar that I was a racist. It was annoying. Did it stop me from spying? No. And so the pendulum is
Right.
swung so wildly, in which we blame plane crashes on DEI stuff. This is crazy.
Yeah,
Was it annoying? Should it be reformed? Yes. Now it's like it explains all of our ills of society.
yeah, blaming women and black people like punching down like that is about the most pathetic thing that I can possibly imagine.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's kind of sad that there are these dudes that are just so intimidated by, a country that is changing that, we're seeing like a backlash
The
against it.
snowflake. Are you
Yeah,
such a
yeah, they're
pussy? I'm
melting
sorry.
down.
You want to be this badass motherfucker in special forces or in the CIA, and you can't take a 2-day class on DEI, and that's going to cause you to quit? I mean, this is crazy. It's
Yeah.
annoying.
I,
Reform it. But
Well,
don't,
I mean,
you
a
know,
couple, I talked to one person who worked for let's just say protective detail at the State Department.
Right.
And he thought DEI was stupid, but it was also just a block on his evaluation.
Yes,
Like,
that's it. Yep.
and it said something about like, are you inclusive with your team members and bringing them into the fold or something like that? He's like, it's dumb, but it didn't affect his job in any way.
Yes.
Or up at Special Operations Command, they had a DEI office with 9 employees working in it, run by a PhD. Um, they all got fired. And I mean, I don't really have a problem with that either because no one I've spoken to knows what the hell these 9 people did up there. So, I mean, I don't think DEI is something that's going to be missed as it goes away. There's going to be some other things, like I should point out the equal opportunity rep is still up there at SOCOM. So, I mean, and that was always separate from DEI. So, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that we recruit from a diverse population. But yeah, DEI, I mean, it's like you said, I don't think it was like destroying or helping America. It was more like something that was like kind of annoying.
So fix it. But the
Right.
Yeah.
idea of this, Musk's kind of preoccupation with this anti-woke stuff and that Pete Hegseth thinks that this is actually what, has affected military readiness is insane. Let me just, my friends who have served at, in the U.S. Navy who just got back, these are some young folks who were, driving a ship in the Pacific somewhere says, you know what, our fucking ships are falling apart. I'm sorry, that's not because of DEI. There's something fundamentally the fundamental reform that certainly needs to take place within the
But it
Pentagon.
goes back to what I said about people being intimidated by
Yeah,
complexity. Like
right. It's hard. Yes, right.
reforming the Navy is a big, complicated, expensive endeavor. It's a lot easier to just blame transsexuals and be like, "Hey, the transsexuals
Yeah.
they destroyed the Navy."
I was out west a while ago, and someone was railing to me about trans athletes in high school sports, and I said, you realize in Utah there's 4 of them. Like literally, this might have decided the presidential election.
Yeah,
Remember
yeah.
the Super Bowl ad that everyone went
That
crazy
ad
about?
was incredible.
And so the Republicans ran this ad. But I mean, this is like 5,000th on the list of important things in
Yeah,
America.
it's not
This
a
is why
national
people end up
issue.
voting. Oh, come on. Right?
Yeah,
All right, let's
if you
talk. Let's get us back on track. Let's talk
Yeah.
Ukraine. What's up?
Yeah. So yesterday, the U.S. delegation included Mark Rubio, and Lavrov met in Saudi Arabia with was MBS at the meeting?
I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Oh,
He
oh
wa-
no, no, it's fine. No,
he
no,
wa-
they met before with him, right?
okay. So
Yeah.
and they had a 4.5 hour meeting, and they came out. I mean, if you're a supporter of Ukraine, I wouldn't say it was a pro-Ukrainian meeting. I think that's fair to say. Um, they came out saying that Ukraine needs to make concessions and stuff like that. It looked like a hostage video with Marco Rubio with the Russian delegates. Um, yeah, so that's where we're at there. There's some word that Putin and Trump are going to meet within the month again. I don't know where. It came out very pro-Russia. I mean, and I told Jack this before the meeting. Like they're going to go into that meeting and come out with a new set of talking points, and it's going to get disseminated out, and these are going to be the new talking points of what Zelensky's going to have to do without Ukraine and without European representation at these meetings. So that's where we're at. Mark?
So let me just start this off again because I think Jack made a good point that we have to criticize things that we see are wrong, but you almost make this on a nonpartisan basis. So I'll say that, if you were Ronald Reagan or John McCain, you'd be horrified at what was the betrayal of Ukraine and the resuscitation, the rehabilitation of a war criminal. It's Vladimir Putin. Yesterday was kind of the culmination of a shocking week in which the U.S. foreign policy changed dramatically. We were the ally of the Ukrainians. We spent $60 billion to attrit the Ukrainian military 50%. Not a single U.S. soldier was killed. Russia is our enemy. Everything from, of course, their invasion of Ukraine to, sabotage and assassination operations across Europe to, by the way, and you all, I think, have talked about it, paying bounties to the Taliban to kill U.S. soldiers. Yet now we are at best a neutral party, and perhaps now we're actually siding with Putin because it wasn't only the results of the Riyadh meeting, it was then President Trump's comments in a press conference in which he essentially blamed Ukraine for being invaded. And so, there was a former British intelligence officer made a comment yesterday that I certainly heard and picked up on. He said, U.S. flushed 80 years of leadership down the toilet. And so I think this is a really a profound moment for the United States. Friends of mine, probably for you all as well, who have worked on and in Ukraine are horrified. But ultimately, well, there's two things. Do the American people care? I don't know. But where are the GOP national security set, who actually many have been in favor of helping Ukrainians? Because yesterday and really the week was not a proud one for the United States. You do wonder, and I know the way my friends in Europe are saying now, are we the good guys anymore?
Yeah. No, that is the question, isn't it?
What do you think, Jack?
I mean, I don't think that a country changes overnight, but I mean, from like a political policy point of view, I mean, we're siding with the evil empire here. Russia was up against they're on the ropes. Their economy is shit. They lost like 800,000 soldiers during the conflict. Why in the world are we appeasing this dictator? It doesn't make any sense to me other than to be, it really is like these people cooked their minds on Twitter and they want to be like edgy contrarians, like, oh, let's go side with this, dictator, this strong man. It's kind of bizarre to me.
Jack, let me give you kind of my thoughts on this, and I think you'll identify with it because both of us were practitioners. So I look at everything differently. I know you guys were very kind. You say I'm a national security analyst, blah, blah, blah. But actually, I always look at it from the guy or the gal on the ground. And so, we went through the 20 years of the GWAT, and I spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. And so we trained indigenous forces, and sometimes we obviously stayed in places too far. And you leave with the whole kind of, I think maybe I don't want to speak for you, but you're like, hey, I'm proud of my service, but yeah, things are a little murky. Like some of my friends really fucked up. Like, I'm not so sure how great, God bless, we had to respond after 9/11, but Iraq, WMD, like, proud of the service there. Anyway, so you leave with like, and then comes Ukraine. And it's a classic David versus Goliath story. And I think for a lot of us, it was appealing because this was right versus wrong. There's no gray, there's no murky.
Yeah.
And then what I think about is the same thing I thought about Afghans who we betrayed and Kurds we betrayed, but the betrayal of the Ukrainians. Imagine if you're one of the members of SAF right now in Europe. I don't think they're in Ukraine, but in Europe, training Ukrainians, or you're a CIA officer at Kyiv Station. How do you look at your partners in the eye this morning after what Trump said? Not only after what happened in Riyadh, but after what Trump said. I mean, these are people you broke bread with. You spent a year plus with them. You know their families. Maybe people in their units have been killed. We were committed to assisting them. So I think of the guy or the gal on the ground, and what it's like to look at your Ukrainian partner in the eye and see their as they're looking at you and hey Jack, man, I love you, but holy shit, you guys are betraying us now, aren't you? What do you say back?
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page. And there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, no, exactly.
What would you say?
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, as the person on the ground, you have to be like diplomatic about it and be
Yeah.
like, yeah, support the policies of the United States government, but we're still committed to this relationship. I've spoken a little bit about it before when I
Really?
saw it.
You would say that?
I mean, what else are you going to say?
Big, this is fucked up. I know. I'm
Well,
sorry.
maybe like at a bar over a beer, you might tell them
Oh,
that.
okay.
Like,
I'm
I
not
think
talking
this is
about
kind of fucked
officially at
up,
like
but
a conference room
But
with
here, but
everybody
here's where you got to
watching.
be careful on this, because if I was sitting across my Ukrainian partner and I said, "Hey, man, like this is totally fucked up. This is wrong, and our president is this is crazy what we're doing." What if this guy goes back, tells his unit commanders and say, "Hey, the agency guys here think this is really screwed up," and that gets back to the White House and back to Washington. You are in an impossible situation. Does that mean well, if you're in the military, you can't, but the agency, do you resign? I mean, if you're in the State Department, do you write a dissent channel? I mean, I don't know what the answer is, because I can't imagine a time in which we have switched policies almost overnight. Now, we saw this coming. This all kind of emanates from Helsinki, years ago when Trump won, when he sided with Putin in when Putin said, I didn't interfere in your elections. Jonathan Lemire of MSNBC asked him a question, who do you believe? And he basically said, I believe Putin over the intelligence services. So you can think of it starting from then, but this right now, this policy flip, I mean, it's pretty wild. And so again, for practitioners on the ground, I mean, I don't know how you serve in a U.S. embassy in Kyiv now. What do you say?
Mark, what do you make of it from a policy standpoint? I mean, I think none of us can or should at all assume that there is some sort of grand strategy behind this, because I
Right.
don't think there is. Um, but still, I mean, why do you think that we did this abrupt is it just a case of like, well, Biden did this, so it's bad, just like during the
Yep.
first Trump administration, anything that Obama did was bad,
Yep.
so we
Yep.
got to reverse that and turn it around? I mean, is it just contrarianism, or is there something else going on here?
Jack, that's a great question. So a couple things just to kind of, but to prep for the answer to that, let me say there is no function in this government now. So ordinarily, policy changes, policy discussions take place at the National Security Council, where you have, and no, this I'm going to get a migraine thinking about this because I participated in them. You have low-level policy meetings at the NSC amongst the interagency, and then it eventually goes up to what's called the Deputies Committee, the DC. That's the deputies of cabinet agencies. And then it goes to the Principals Committee, chaired by the National Security Advisor. Then the president will come in. So there's a policy process and saying, hey, we're going to do something different. I don't think this shit's going on right now, because if you look what happened in Munich, Pete Hegseth stepped on his crank. I'm sorry. This is someone who is wildly unqualified for the job. And he goes out there and he gives this speech, which all of my information was not coordinated with anybody, and basically says, Ukraine will never be in NATO, just giving away one of our, negotiating positions.
Yeah, it's wild.
Everyone goes crazy. Then JD Vance comes and gives this lecture about to Europe, saying, actually, Russia's not your biggest enemy. Actually, the European war on free speech is. And people's minds are blown. And then Trump says something else. And by the way, General Kellogg, former Green Beret, where the fuck is he? So he was supposed to be the envoy. So we have no voice in any of this. And the only thing that matters, and one of the things I've been saying, on my TV hits, is that Trump is the only one who matters in this. And
Yes.
again, you look at
well,
don't
Trump and Elon.
And Elon, right? Don't you think Mike Waltz, a former Green Beret, or Marco Rubio, a longtime member of the Senate, now Secretary of State, don't you think they know better? But
what did you make of that press conference they gave yesterday, where Mike Waltz and Rubio, they looked like they just had their lunch eaten by the Russians? Like,
because
they just looked sad.
They have no experience in negotiations. They have no experience in dealing with people like Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, who's been there for 2 decades. God bless Mike Waltz and what he did for our country. And Marco Rubio has actually been a voice against autocracy and for human rights. And they're sitting there like Saddam-esque, parroting the great leader of Trump. But let me go back to, why does this all occur? And one of the things that CIA did really well, we fucked a lot of things up, but we would do these leadership profiles of foreign heads of state. So can you imagine the leadership profile that the British or the French or the Germans or anyone else has done of Trump when it comes to Ukraine? Because I think he actually detests Ukraine. He thinks this was one of the reasons why he was originally impeached. And he particularly hates Zelensky. And so for him, it's all personal. So what I'm trying to say is there's no way we are ever going to support Ukraine or Zelensky. It's just not going to happen because that's
Yeah,
just baked into Trump's DNA. And it doesn't matter if everybody around Trump, not everybody, but people like Waltz and Rubio want to support the Ukrainians. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. So there's from the New York Times, Trump sees Putin as a compatriot and a strong player who was a genius for bullying Ukraine. That's
and
from the New York Times.
Zelensky said sometime in the last 24 hours that Trump is living in a Russian manufactured disinformation environment.
I mean, it is good that, like, because Zelensky was saying all the right things the last couple of months. The election happened as a transition's going on, saying what he needs to say to try and keep Trump on side. And now you do see him kind of bucking a little bit,
Yeah.
which is good to see.
The lead up to that is that agreement they tried to hand him at Munich.
Right.
Where, apparently the Trump administration wanted him to turn over like 50% of the natural resources of Ukraine over in exchange for what? I'm not even
in
clear on
exchange
that.
for previous support, not even new support.
So do you know how gross this is? I mean, think about the United States, and don't laugh at me when I say this because I believed it, and I still and I still want to, but we're supposed to be the good guys. America stands for economic and political freedom, and we don't always live up to this. But there is the notion of the bright shining city on the hill, and I'll tell you, if you go to any U.S. embassy, consulate section overseas, anywhere, there's a line around the corner because people want to come to America for a reason. And we, values do matter. Again, Pete Hegseth in his speech in Europe said actually values don't matter, only military might matters. And, my head blew off again because that's just not what America is about.
It doesn't even make sense.
Right, it doesn't make any sense. But now we are a transactional government. This is the age of kings and queens again.
Yeah.
We're only gonna do anything that is, has direct financial interest for the United States. Like this idea of trading minerals. I mean, I think I understand why the Ukrainians would go along with it because they're like, we'll do anything at this point. But it's gross. Again, the American ideal means something. And I was thinking about the other day, and I've talked about this, we've had great conversations on the Team House about, how do we recruit agents? And, there's that old acronym MICE. And so we end up gaining someone else's trust, an Iranian government official, it's Russian, Chinese, based on their vulnerabilities, but it's based on this acronym MICE, which is money, ideology, coercion, which we really don't do, and ego. And that's what you're trying to plug into. Some people are financially vulnerable. Some people have been screwed at work, so you can go for their ego. But a huge amount of people we recruit is based on ideology because we're the good guys. I mean, and that's the idea of political and economic freedom. And are we actually going to take that off the table? And so that's what I was thinking about the other day, just because to me, it was just this transactional foreign policy is just gross.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, you feel like we're going back to the age of kings and queens. And that's
Right.
exactly what I've been reading about in Nick Land's writings, which apparently Nick Land was and is influential on the thinking of Elon Musk and the people around him. And Nick Land specifically talks about how liberalism has failed, democracy has failed, America is a failed experiment. He uses this term, the cathedral, to describe like our institutions, that it is just this sort of self-replicating zombie. And that what we need instead is a monarch CEO. And
Yeah.
he goes into like, it really is going to be like a government of high status males, basically all just corncobbing each other, I guess. And you have this monarch CEO at the top that just says like, this is how it's going to be.
So that seems like exactly what's happening. So good on you to be reading that. I got to pick that book up because
Yeah, and I should point out too that like behind like all the like kind of like cool branding that this looks like it's something new or kind of hip, it's really just boilerplate fascism. There's nothing really new about it. It's just fascism with some clever branding around it.
and I think that should go to kind of this existential question on, who are we right now? And one of the things that I think that is going to be very telling, will the American people then at some point say, hey, this is really not what we signed up for? We elected Donald Trump because there was inflation. The price of eggs were high. Now, let alone you can't find any goddamn eggs anywhere. I want some eggs. There's no eggs in Whole Foods. This is driving me crazy in Vienna, Virginia. But who, are we okay with this? And so, we're going to see over the next several months and years, and maybe the midterm elections, but are the American people okay? Which, Ann Applebaum is a writer who I love, all of her kind of analysis. And there's a piece she wrote for The Atlantic this last week or two, where she actually called what's happening as regime change in America.
Yeah.
Because it's not only foreign policy that's changing, but just fundamentally inside the United States, this theory of the unitary executive, this all-powerful presidency. Right. There's no
well,
branches
maybe
of
even a little
anymore.
bit worse than that, though, Mark. Because I mean, when I listen to President Trump, I mean, it just sounds like old man babble to me. It doesn't even make sense what he's saying. It seems like Elon is actually running the show,
and JD Vance as well. And JD Vance has some very extreme views on this. So I actually agree with you. And so, are we okay with dismantling the entire or firing 30 or 40% of the U.S. government? If the American people are okay with that, and there's a bird flu epidemic or there's a measles epidemic in Texas, and people are going to die, okay, well, maybe we deserve what we're going to get. But I'm not so sure that's the case. And I mean, there's just the stories of the last couple of days. The Republican Party is supposed to be the party of national security, to support the military or back the blue. Is that what firing FBI agents is all about? Is that what, there's been, with all these cuts or these, terminations, reductions in force of these probationary employees, that's military spouses who are getting fired. None of this makes sense. The VA, I mean, does the VA need reform? Oh, my God, of course it does. But it just I guess my question is the American people are the American people going to be okay with this when the real effects of some of these changes
exactly
coming about, because it is radical, and I don't think I mean, they said they were going to do it, sort of. I don't think they realized that Elon Musk would be the co-president. But ultimately it's pretty dramatic what's happening, and for people, I think it's so lazy intellectually when people say, yeah, fuck the government. You see a lot of conservatives say that. That's okay, good. The federal government's too big. Okay, so, when the FAA doesn't have controllers in the control tower, is that what government too big means? This is just not being done smartly or with any kind of, direction. It's like how Elon Musk, when he took over Twitter, he fired everybody and then kind of rebuilt it. You don't do that with the government.
One of the interpretations of that people have advanced of what is Donald Trump? What does that represent? What, this sort of end of an era and the beginning of a next. And I mean, one of the probably easiest to understand takes on it is that Trump is a wrecking ball that the voters, that the constituents sent to Washington to destroy the place because they're so fucking angry and so fed up. And some of those issues, those anger issues with we've talked about DEI, they're hyped up, it's grievance politics, but there are real issues that Americans are sick and tired, and they're fed up, and they're tired of being fed bullshit all the time. And I think many people, rightly or wrongly, they see Donald Trump as the guy that's going to cut through that.
So yeah, you're 100% right, and I think we also don't have a party in opposition. The Democratic Party is not
absolute pussies. Excuse me from being so brass.
And so there certainly is a whole kind of AAR going on. Forensic analysis of how in the world did this happen? Did Donald Trump get elected because of this disruption? Were the Democrats that dysfunctional? And I think you can make a very strong case that the answer is yes. So what do we need? I mean, now we're getting into some weirder territory. One of the things I talked to a friend of mine the other day, said, we need an oligarch in the center, like a Mark Cuban, to come in and and be the cat. I don't know, kind of makes some sense. I guess. But because one of the things that you have, going back to something Jack you said earlier, is so I love your podcast. I'm on your podcast, but some podcasts in the United States have done tremendous harm in spreading misinformation and disinformation. And so when you look at and I'm sure Dee scours the lists of podcasts, what do well and what don't. Tucker Carlson or Joe Rogan, there's a lot of nonsense that's spewed on there. And that's how Americans are getting their information right now. So so how do you counter that? How do you counter it? I mean, you just have to tell the truth. Because there's so much crap on these kind of podcasts that have gazillions of viewers.
I don't know
And
that the truth can necessarily compete though with people's emotions, and that
yeah,
they get emotionally triggered by certain outrageous things. And I feel like that the algorithms that these companies are using, that they're actually encouraging, and I know for a fact that they encourage you to put out outrageous content all the time.
right.
Dee and I have had many conversations about this. And it's interesting to see how the algorithm itself is sort of like barfing up this new ideology in the last few years that combines right-wing politics, the military, Christianity, but also like UFOs,
Yeah, conspiracy theories. Yeah,
earthquake weapons.
yeah,
What's going on here? And I think it really is an algorithm that all ideologies are filled with inconsistent, dumb ideas. But I think you're seeing a new one start to coalesce because of this arbitrary algorithm.
And then people have this incredible distrust, particularly of government. I mean, one of my buddies, he's actually a cop. He was down at the FBI. Quantico runs these annual conferences for kind of local police officers. I actually went and I did a leadership talk a couple years at it, but he was wearing an FBI polo shirt around Quantico, just going to the local 7-Eleven or whatever, getting his gas at Sheets or I don't know, whatever the heck it was. And someone came up and said something like derogatory against the bureau. Like, I don't trust you guys. And you're like, you live in Quantico. Like the
yeah.
whole this town is fundamentally based on FBI, DI, and the Marine Corps', base being here. And it's just to me that was, and he was shocked. He's a big city East Coast, cop. So he doesn't see this kind of that kind of. I mean, he sees an anti-police bias probably from other people on the streets, but he was shocked at this. This is regular old kind of person in a pickup truck saying something nasty to him because he's wearing an FBI shirt. I mean that there. So again, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to kind of throw out there, just in terms as of course, this is a national security podcast. It has to do with kind of the pending reductions, both at the State Department, CIA, and FBI, and maybe even lead off with kind of USAID. But my view of working alongside AID Foreign Service officers over the years is that's a tremendous kind of value added for us in terms of soft power. I mean, there's multiple military officials, U.S. military folks I've met over the years who actually said AID was indispensable to the United States national security. What's your thought on that? And essentially gutting foreign aid entirely.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where some voters think that half of our GDP goes to foreign aid.
Right.
I mean,
It's
they
incredible.
seriously believe that.
Yeah,
When I don't know what the actual percent is. It's for sure less than 1%. It's probably closer to like
that's
0.01%.
correct. Yep.
And that foreign aid, it develops our soft power. And what people don't really understand about that is it's not like just to be nice. It's like we're also looking for something in return. There's some leverage we're hoping to develop through foreign aid. Sometimes it's in goodwill, like, hey, you're an ally, you just got pounded by an earthquake. We want to help you guys out. And there's not like strings attached to it or anything. But like foreign military sales and USAID and all that kind of stuff, there is a sort of like give and take to all of that, that I don't think a lot of people acknowledge or want to acknowledge.
And Jack, who do you think when we stop doing that, who do you think takes our place?
Yeah, Russia, China,
Right.
Iran.
China. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
move right
just
in.
ceding soft power to China for a tiny kind of fraction of investment, on top of the notion that I think there's some figure that was thrown around 20, we've saved 20 million people with kind of the HIV prevention what's it
Yeah,
called?
yeah,
PEPFAR.
which is objectively a good thing.
It's a conservative program too. I mean, conservatives love this program. So it's just this is to me is insanity. And then you go to the notion of the probationary officer issue, and that's where the U.S. government is firing the probationary staff of the U.S. I mean, the administration.
And again, sorry to interrupt, Mark, but
Yeah,
just to point out, there are a lot of people out there who think probationary officers are people who are on probation because they're in trouble because they
no,
did something wrong. You
it's
want to tell
officers,
them
right?
what it really means?
It's officers within 1 to 4 years of experience. I think the intelligence community has a higher number. It's several years, maybe 3 years into your 4 years into your career, but for others, a year. And so what we're doing, so all federal agencies had to give lists to OMB about their probationary staff because it's easier to fire them. If you're on your probationary period, you don't have the same amount of rights. This is insane. Again, as I said, I'm going and talking to colleges all the time. I got a text message from a kid I mentored at the Citadel, who is a Republican, who then joined the national security state and was just fired, and he is despondent. And because this is Gen Z, this is the next generation of security practitioners. It's who you and I and D in this podcast are trying to pass the torch to get them excited about this. We've just fired these people. That's insane. It also makes no sense. So, for example, if if you say, the new director, the CIA, John Ratcliffe, wants to beef up our spying capability. He said that, because the agency's too woke, so we got to get better against China. You just fired your staff who's going to go serve in the embassy in Beijing. It's nuts. And I think it also seems misguided. If you want to, I don't know if they have the right legally, but if you want to say, look, I'm going to replace the C-suites of the FBI and CIA, fine, do it. What are you doing going after the junior staff? This is not the woke ideologues of the Biden administration. These are kids right out of college who wanted to serve their country, and the rest of their fucking classmates are making a shitload more money. I just don't get it.
I mean, it's just like a real business. It's a businessman thinking, right? Like, what's your first move when you don't have a good quarter?
Yeah, it's Jack Welch, just like trim the fat.
Yeah, it's just lay people off.
A bunch of people.
And like, I'll make a guess that like when they go to DOD, they're gonna cut people too, and we'll see how that.
This week.
Yeah, like what people were saying, like, oh, they're going to look at the procurement process. Like, no, they're not. They're not going to look at the primes and the money that the defense contractors are making. Let's be honest here.
So
the first move is to scalps. Right. They want scalps.
So the Economist just had a great article this week talking about the need for reform at DOD, and exactly that. How everything is jacked up. But that has nothing to do with the idea of going in and firing your probationary staff. One of the interesting things now is because there's so much pork barrel politics, there's so much congressional interest. Individual congressmen and women have their pet projects and have people at military bases. So these DOD cuts, I don't know if you're a Republican congressman, you're going to hear it this week when people start getting fired.
But what they're worried about is if a Republican congressman comes out and says something against Trump, that Elon's going to primary him and drop.
I know. So this is
$30 million on a primary appointment. Yeah,
I mean the lack of courage amongst the Republican kind of national security set is incredible to me. And again, half my friends
and all of these corporations too. Isn't it interesting that they went from unwavering support for DEI to totally bowing down immediately?
Yeah,
and I've railed against this for years. That these companies use this crass advertising. That we have like BLM ice cream and gay pride Oreos, and it's just a way corporations try to sell us shit that we don't need. And but it's still disconcerting to see if we did have like a fascist or a communist government, these same corporations would be selling us products covered with a hammer and sickle or a swastika.
But they are. Everyone's bowing to the knee. I mean, the people can't rush to the White House. These CEOs can't rush fast enough.
Yeah.
One of the things also that I wanted to raise, again, for folks who are interested in the intelligence community, when you're, I mean, this literally, I'm going to tell you something that 100% happens. So as you get promoted up through the agency or the IC or the State Department, I'm sure FBI, there's always going to be the flavor of the day. So at one point it was, okay, you need a little more kind of DEI experience. And so you, Mark, case officer Mark, after serving overseas and getting shot at war zones and all this stuff, we need you to go do a rotation in some kind of, recruitment office where there's some little DEI flavor in order to get promoted. Okay. And you know what you say? You say, all right, I got to check the box. I mean, Jack, you're in the military. This shit happens all the time. You got to go
checking the box. Yes.
You got to check the box. So I'm going to go check the box. And all of a sudden Trump's elected. And what they did is they then fired anybody in a DEI position. These are rotational positions. It's a regular case officer, a senior manager who was told to get promoted. He or she had to go to this position. They're there and they are now out of a job. And One of the things I saw an article yesterday, I was actually happy with this, is that there was 11 such officers at the agency, and a judge has kind of frozen their dismissal because this is like the lawyer Kevin Carroll, former agency officer, was like, these are people who were told to take this job. They're case officers or analysts. Like, what are you doing firing them? But that was this blanket thing. Like anyone who ever touched DEI is going to get fired. Again, that just again, I mean, these are common sense stuff that I think the American people should agree was nuts, but we'll see if it kind of sticks or not.
The one other thing I wanted to, ask you about, or to put our finger on a little bit here, regarding USAID, but also all the other stuff going on with like the IRS and the Treasury Department and so on. And I think it's important to point out that Elon Musk is lying about what's going on in these organizations, describing congressionally approved expenditures as being quote unquote fraud.
Right.
That these are lies. This is a liar who is telling bold-faced lies to the American public about their government.
He admitted it, Jack, in that bizarre press conference where in the Oval Office where his kid was picking his nose.
Yeah.
Which was I actually thought that was incredibly funny.
Yeah, but that was on purpose, Mark. I mean,
the nose picking?
No, the kid being in the shot.
No, I like the nose picking part of it.
I know it's hilarious and cute, but that's like to distract.
Yeah. And Trump looked like a hostage there too. He was
miserable. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
But Elon Musk said something really interesting because someone said, "Hey, by the way, this charge that we spent $50 million for condoms at Hamas actually is not true." And Elon Musk said, "Yeah, sometimes we're going to get things wrong." Yet Fox News blurts out this $50 million condoms in Gaza bullshit nonstop and gets everybody kind of all hyped up that AID is this, is now a terrorist supporting entity. I mean, I don't know. It's what is it? It's pro-choice, pro-birth control, terrorist sympathizers. I mean, it's freaking madness. But Elon Musk lied, and he said, "Yeah, sometimes we're going to get it wrong, and we'll get corrected." And then the damage is done already. And so I think the thing there's a couple things that to me are really chilling about these Doge folks' access into kind of the secret world. I don't know who these individuals are. I don't know if they have security clearances. The idea that they have access to the Treasury system or the IRS is terrifying as an American citizen, because that's your personal data.
Well, and the question is why the fuck do they need access to our personal data for government efficiency? Like what?
And for an administration that looks like there is going to be a campaign of retribution against Trump's political enemies. I mean, this should scare the crap out of every conservative. Like, this is why my head is going to explode. Conservatives should be outraged. This is massive government overreach into privacy. And then the other part is, when you talk about these people poking around in the Treasury or the national security institutions, there's a huge counterintelligence issue. And there was a story, and I don't know if it's true or not. It's been reported quite often. I imagine it's true that somehow the agency sent down the first name and last initial of the entire probationary cadre, 2,500 officers, down to OMB in an unsecured manner. We just then, in essence, compromised the entire covert status of our next generation.
Yeah, we spoke about that in a previous episode. Yeah.
Again, insane. Yeah. And an own goal by the agency, but I think they're probably just obviously trying to comply. There should be an investigation on how that even.
I mean, that's gets into the other interesting thing about like compliance. Like if you're working at the CIA and they tell you to send an email with all these names over an unsecured net, I mean, isn't your answer going to be, no, I'm not doing that because it's illegal?
And which is what, that's why the acting director of the FBI, former HRT guy, was considered a hero down at the Bureau because he's actually resisting some of this stuff. He's probably, I would imagine, not going to be there.
It baffles me a little bit because, like, if some 19-year-old pimple-faced kid shows up in my office at VA, IRS, Treasury, FBI, and starts telling me he needs to look at the computers and this is how it's going to be, dude, I get old school on that ass and show him right out the door. I'd turn that dude right around. But it seems like nobody's willing to do that.
Well, so the two AID security chiefs were fired after they said no.
Yeah. I mean, how many inspector generals were fired?
They're all gone, right? Yeah. So again, this is but who is the architect of the IG and of whistleblower stuff? These are people like Chuck Grassley, a very conservative Republican. And so the Republican Party is dead on these issues. They've been good on this stuff. They believe, whistleblowers are critical. The Inspector General staff, absolutely critical, because what does it do? It uncovers government malfeasance. That's a conservative principle that so many in Congress seem to have
That's what
forgotten
I don't
about.
understand. Like, why fire inspector generals if you're trying to trim the fat and make these agencies more
Because it's a
efficient?
cult. Because it's a cult.
That's right. It's the power of the unitary
All that
executive.
matters is
Right,
one
right.
person.
Yeah.
One
And
person
again,
that
if you're a
matters.
true conservative, I don't see how you're supportive of this stuff. And so we'll see if anyone has kind of power or strength. I think you're going to see this week the probable nomination going through of Kash Patel. Uh,
Crazy.
Same thing what happened
That's
with
like
Tulsi.
me going to the FBI and being the director.
But I mean, so whether it's Patel or Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed, or RFK Jr. was confirmed. I mean, these are Hegseth was confirmed. When you talk to Republicans, I live in DC on the side, none of these people are qualified. And so, but they see it in a much different fashion. This is based on political survival. If they voted against these individuals, they would get primaried. And again, that to me, that goes against, your principles when you take an oath to the Constitution to do the right thing. They did not. I would much rather, be out of a job than to have on my record that I voted for some of these people.
Yeah.
That's me.
Oh, God. I don't feel good about this conversation at all.
I mean, I don't know. What's there something good to look forward to? I'm trying to think. Baseball season's coming up.
There's we got
I got some great concert tickets. I'm gonna go. Oh, Jack, you're gonna love this. Come on. Next Thursday, I'm gonna go see Dropkick Murphys in DC at a tiny little place of 5,000 people in the stands.
That's cool.
That's some old school punk. Come on, you gotta
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it.
Oh, and another bit of news. Kellogg arrived in Kiev today. I saw a video of him. He took some questions. He looked, I mean, what does a guy like that do when he shows up in Kiev after the day before what happened yesterday during that meeting and the aftermath with Trump, basically just siding with Russia more or less. Like, what does a guy like Kellogg go through? He's going to meet everybody, right, in Kiev. Like, what does he tell these people?
I mean,
Comply.
I mean, I would imagine there's going to be some damage control. I mean, which is often the case. I mean, Rubio has come out and said, no, the Ukrainians going to be at the table. Again, it's a dysfunctional government. Nobody knows what we're talking about. I mean, my friends who were at the Munich Security Conference came back and said it was incredible to see the whiplash. And our European partners are horrified. And again, for those who think that Europe doesn't matter, and I think there's probably a lot of people on the right who are very dismissive of Europe. They shouldn't be, because 1,000 NATO members were killed in Afghanistan defending the United States. Even the Ukrainians. Think about the scenes at HKIA at Hamid Karzai Airport with the chaotic withdrawal. You saw some people outside. Of course, the U.S. military was there very bravely. You saw a lot of people in Tiger Stripes, which is kind of maybe some intelligence community, paramilitary forces, Afghans. And you saw the Ukrainian special forces who were there after the U.S. left. We are not going to have any friends or allies if we treat people like shit. If we turn into this kind of imperialist bully, another 9/11, no one's coming to our aid. 158 Canadians were killed in Afghanistan. And yet we're beating the shit out of Canada every day. I mean, for those of us who kind of worked with partner forces, worked on liaison relationships, this stuff matters. And I think we're kind of going south. I don't know. So, Kellogg will do some damage control. I mean, they're going to try to. I mean, right now the personal relationship between Trump and Zelensky is now gone right into the toilet. So how you repair that, I'm not sure.
So yeah, Zelensky, like probably an hour ago, I've begun discussions with European leaders, and I believe they would step up and fund the Ukrainian armed forces if the U.S. does not. EU has agreed on new sanctions on package on Russia. Financial Times. And I read some article that there was talks of like the EU package for Ukraine being like upwards of like 800, 900 billion euros.
Good. I hope so. I mean, they have it. I mean, Europe's got to get its shit together. They need
Yeah.
leadership. Europeans certainly have the capacity to do this. The question is, any kind. So there's one is kind of, sustainability. If you talk to people, and I'm going to botch this, of course, I'm not a military analyst, but certainly Europe needs stuff. I mean, sorry, Ukraine needs stuff, but this has actually turned into this kind of drone war. And so, and Ukraine is producing. There's a lot of indigenous production. So I think Europe certainly can step up and lead. There can be some kind of Europe security force there. But again, this is going away from U.S. leadership. Certainly, any kind of U.S. role, and perhaps that's ultimately what Trump wants to kind of walk away from all this. The other point on this too is that under NATO there's an issue of what's called Article 5, which is attack on one NATO member, other people will come to our aid. That's why 1,000 NATO members were killed in Afghanistan. I think that whole notion of Article 5 is dead.
I mean, the only time it was ever invoked was 9/11.
Yep. And 1,000 NATO members were killed.
Right.
Which is why I think so much of this kind of Europe bashing is so insulting. Just why, same thing with, again, 159 Canadian troops.
Yeah, there were 49 Danish troops who died
right.
in Afghanistan, which is a hell of a lot of people for a small country like that.
Yet we want to invade Greenland.
Like I said, it's not a left or right issue. It's just dumb. Like it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. What are we doing? We're going to have no friends. And Jack, from your former unit and certainly stuff that I did, a lot of the time was done training with other countries' militaries or intelligence services. That's going to go away. We are going to have no friends. And so we're going to have a short-term win. So the president of Panama says something about this whole mess with the Panama Canal, which makes my head hurt. But ultimately, are we going to have anyone come to our assistance in our time of need? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it seems like they want short-term wins so that it's a little feather in the hat of the administration, but like with destroying everything around it,
I mean, again, are we the good guys? You look like an asshole. I mean, my time goes back to, so what would it be like? Let's play a game here at a diplomatic reception. In the past, you hang out with the Brits because they're fun and they like to drink. You go over to the French because they probably have some good wine going on, and maybe they're talking about a new restaurant they went to, and so you're checking out around town. I mean, who do we hang out with now? It's not Europe anymore. I mean, it's going to be like like the Pakistani dat, the defense that shit. I don't know. Like, who are our friends? Is it going to be the authoritarians who come by and kind of give a little wink? Hey, like you're one of us now. Like I don't know what it's like to be an American diplomat with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to like close off some of my thoughts on it, I have been kind of like dismayed. I mean, we've talked a little bit about like the failure of like the media, the Democrats, the Republicans to confront some of these issues. Talk about academia for a moment. Like I was reading the last issue of Foreign Affairs, which was written between the time that Trump was elected and inauguration. So he wasn't yet in office when that issue was published. But all of these scholars, political scholars, and damn near every single one of them was like, well, the Trump administration may prove to be surprisingly nuanced in some ways that you didn't quite expect. And, it's not going to be as bad as you think it's going to be because the resiliency of the global system is like completely out to lunch, like completely detached from reality.
I call it wishful thinking. I was and I quit. I was a member of a Signal chat where there was some really very esteemed kind of historians involved, and that's what I heard from them. It was this wishful thinking.
Yeah,
it's not going to be so bad. And of course, I go through my daily catastrophizing, so maybe it's a ding on me. I get criticized on social media, on Twitter.
Doom scrolling.
Well, part of the whole Peter Thiel stuff. Part of the whole Peter Thiel thought process about that guy Nick Lane is like they attack academics too. Like academics are in the crosshairs. So I think they're doing the same thing as like the Republicans. Republican Congress people or the big corporate CEOs is like they're trying to hedge their bets and do the right thing so they don't get fucking targeted.
But I rejoined this chat. I was invited back in because I was being an asshole and railing against everybody. And some of the historians, these are like former deans of major universities, said to me, "You were right. It's actually worse than what you predicted." So I think that in academia, it's changing a little bit too, because again, it's now my argument would be, well, he said he was going to do all this. Read Project 2025.
Yeah,
he's coming through on all of his promises. There ain't nothing new in this stuff. I mean, there's a playbook. They are following it to the T. But Jack, I think you're 1,000% right. There's so much wishful thinking. There's it's not this bad, or I think that there's people are going to regret some of these articles. It reminds me, I mean, just this it just came like it's like when Jake Sullivan wrote in, was it Foreign Affairs or Foreign Policy just before
Foreign
Gaza,
affairs. Yeah.
October 7th. Hey, the Middle East is peaceful. This is great.
Yeah. He was like, we fixed Palestine, Israel. Yeah.
Not so much. We didn't even talk about the Middle East, about
Right.
the U.S. now advocating, ethnic cleansing in Gaza, which as a Middle East hand, that is my expertise. My head blew off with that. I mean, again, are we the good guys? Are we actually advocating the ethnic cleansing of Gaza?
Well, I mean,
Whatever
that
you
that
have,
one that one's on Biden, and Trump just solidified it and put it on paper, kind of.
I mean, come on, what are we doing? So anyhow, I could talk to you guys all day. It's fun. And I can't wait to see some of the. You'll get some positive responses. You'll get some hate mail for
No,
this.
people are gonna freak the fuck out.
Let them. Let them.
Yeah.
Jack, one last question. How's your book doing?
Good, really good. Yeah, We Defy is done really well, and I'm working on a novel right now that I have been hired to write.
Ooh, very good. Hey, see, DC, I'm playing producer now. I'm playing like MC here. I'm
I
asking
love
Jack
it.
to make his book, plug in his book.
Thank you.
So Jack Murphy, of course, We Defy. Great job, Mark, on that. You can check it out. The link will be in the description. All the other guys' stuff, the links will be in the description. Mick Mulroy doing incredible work with Fogbow and Longbow. Mark P, MSNBC analyst, national security analyst. Where else can people find Twitter?
Member of
Everything.
the deep state.
Core, deep, yeah, hardcore. When is the new podcast? Are you going to come out with a new podcast? What's it?
Yes,
looking like?
there's some exciting news, but not to be announced yet. It's
Okay.
a podcast from across the pond.
Cool.
That I'll be a member of, and then so yeah.
So something's cooking. So stay tuned
Something's
for
cooking.
that. Yeah.
Right.
And patreon.com/a-teamhouse. Please don't leave it. If you got upset, join it, please. Also, our merch store. All the links will be in the description. Patreon.com/a-teamhouse. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you.